So welcome everyone. Welcome Ronnie. It is wonderful to have you here today at this webinar for the Freelancer Academy hosted by 9am. I'm Marta. I'm the Growth Marketing and Events Manager at 9am, and I will be hosting the webinar today. So our guest speaker, Ronnie, is an Agile Coach, career strategist, and mindset transformation coach. He has over a decade of experience in project management and specializes in Agile methodologies. Before handing over to Ronnie, I just wanted to quickly let you know the structure of this webinar. So I'm just going to quickly explain what is 9am and what we do for those who are new and haven't tried the product. And then we'll have our amazing speaker presenting, and at the end, we'll have 10 minutes to answer any questions you may have. Please type your questions in the chat during the webinar. You don't have to wait until the end. And last but not least, once the webinar is over, a survey will come up on your screen. Please complete it if you can. It will have just literally 20 seconds, and it could be great for us to have your feedback. So we define 9am as the freelancer operating system. So it is basically all-in-one tool that you need as a freelancer. Whether you are starting or just growing your business, we can assist you in getting new clients, arranging projects, receiving payments, and handling your finances. Everything is free, so please sign up and try it. I personally think the product is great, and if you have any feedback, anything you think is missing, and you would like to see there, feel free to share your thoughts with us, and we are always trying to find ways to improve. So now I can hand over to Ronnie.
All right, Marta, thanks. Thanks for the introduction, and hello, everyone. Let me try to share my screen here. By the way, I'm happy to be here. And it was an opportunity that Marta reached out to me and presented to me that I thought it would be ridiculous for me to pass up on. So I'll take this opportunity to really talk to you guys about just key things here from an Agile Coach perspective, as far as some of the things that you can do to really be able to be effective with your job, working with our clients as freelancers. So without further ado, let's get started. So as Martha said, if you have any questions as far as I'm going through it, just put it in the chat and I'll try my best to answer them as best way I possibly can. So let's start from the top, right? So let's start with agility first of all. And I chose this word agility on purpose because the way Agile has been positioned lately has been a lot more confusing than the way it should be. So agility from a methodology to a mindset. The reason I labeled it in this manner is because initially, if we go back to 2001 when Agile was officially introduced to the world, it was introduced as a methodology. I mean, the white paper is still out there for people who want to go online and look it up. It was introduced as a methodology, and that methodology was it was more presented as a substitute for the existing methodology at the time, which was waterfall. So waterfall was dominant, and like people know, like project managers and all that, that's all involved. That's all in the waterfall environment. So 17 guys got together and said, okay, we're trying to uncover better ways of building software, because at that point, technology was taking over and software was becoming a thing. And they decided, okay, let's get together and figure it out and uncover better ways of working and also helping other people do it as well. So they got together, discussed and worked a few things out. And that's how they came about with Agile, right? Now, over time, Agile has transitioned from just a methodology to a mindset. And how has that become a mindset? Because being a methodology, people were so focused on trying to build a structure or some kind of a framework around the term Agile itself. So now over time, it has transitioned from just being a methodology to a mindset where it goes beyond just having a structured way of working to more of a system where people can actually, evolve in terms of be able to adapt and adjust their thought processes, where they can better collaborate and learn and stay flexible just to try to achieve high performing results. So that's how Agile shifted from just a methodology to a mindset. Now, we're not saying that it still cannot be structured or be boxed in a framework. It still can, but the goal here is to have the mindset to be able to adjust and adapt based on customer demands and based on, demands that come from the users of your product, basically. Now, when you look at the second part of this slide here, it talks about I kind of highlight the different frameworks. So Agile being the top guy itself, like why we refer to it as the Agile umbrella. So that's like the bigger, the mother of all frameworks. So Agile has its own frameworks that are listed, that are labeled under that particular methodology. So Scrum, which we all probably heard of at some point, is the most popular framework under the Agile umbrella. And of course, you have Kanban, you have Safe, Less, Nexus, Crystal, there's a bunch of them, right? But the top three are the most popular: Scrum, Kanban, and Safe. Now, some of these like Safe and Less and Nexus are all for like scale teams that are maybe 8 or more people. Now, Scrum is more for singular teams or maybe 1 or 2 teams or 3 teams. So those are basically the top frameworks that are under the Agile umbrella. Again, like I mentioned, there are several frameworks out there. It's just a few that I was just trying to put out there to send a message. Now, when these 17 guys got together, they said, okay, now, since we've discovered that, we've determined that Agile will be the next methodology that we want to push out there to take over, well, not really take over, but to really be a better alternative to waterfall. They came up with 4 Agile values. They came up with 4 values, and these values goes as such. So individual interactions over processes and tools. So what they're trying to establish here is, instead of focusing on tools and different processes that has been established in the waterfall environment, let's try to push the interactions with people, right? Being able to collaborate and interact with people as the main driving force. Because we think to be able to really achieve the goals or build better software, we need to push that agenda forward, the interactions with people. And the second value was working software over comprehensive documentation. So the motive behind this is, instead of focusing too much on trying to document everything like technical requirements or detailed descriptions of things, we should focus more on building better software, because at the end of the day, that's what the customers care about. The third value here talks about customer collaboration. So more about, collaborate with your customer. Your customer should be up to speed as far as what's going on, how the work is going, and so they can see it and give feedback based on what they see, that based on the results that they get, if it's actually matching their expectations or if it's helping them solve their problems, instead of contract negotiation. So, because if you think about a typical waterfall environment, contract negotiation, once you in a waterfall environment, once a team or the stakeholders meet with the client, they try to accumulate or try to get all the requirements up front. Try to make sure that, okay, they understand everything that the client wants. Then they go and start building it. But what Agile is trying to push here is, no, we want to constantly collaborate with our customers, because we understand that things are not going to go as planned. So we want to make sure that we stay in that up to date with them and not be rigid and stuck on the initial agreement, because things change. It's software. I mean, technology grows and changes happen as we go. Then, of course, that leads to responding to change over following a plan. So like I was mentioning earlier, or like I just mentioned a few seconds ago, sometimes, like in the waterfall environment, what people in the waterfall environment try to do is have a plan, right? Okay, how are we going to deliver this? Let's try to get our requirements together, make sure we get all our analysis and get everything in place before we start. But Agile is pushing more the idea of, no, we want to respond to change, because things normally, what the ideas that customers or clients have in the beginning can change somewhere in between. And we cannot be rigid and not be able to have that flexibility to be able to implement those changes as we go. So those are the 4 values that it came about. But now one thing that they emphasized on was, so why there is so much value on the left, I mean, why there's so much value on the right, they value, the items on the left more. So basically what they're trying to say is, like processes and tools, comprehensive documentation, contract negotiation, and following a plan is all good and fine because all of those still exist in an agile environment. But what they're trying to push forth is, the items on the left, which is individual interactions, building working software, customer collaboration, and responding to change. So those are the things that they're trying to drive forth over the other things on the right. So that's not completely eliminating the items on the right. Now, in those agile values, I mean, in those the agile manifesto, when these guys came together and came up with the agile values, they also came up with 12 principles, right? And those 12 principles are the guiding principles that they anticipate. It is not these are just guiding principles that everybody who's trying to really push forth agile delivery should keep in mind, right? Those are the pillars that you need to embody to be able to really be a good agile practitioner, if you will. So the first principle here, I'm not going to read through it. All of it, but just going to explain what they represent. So the first principle here talks about, prioritizing continuous delivery to the customers, right? So as teams or as individuals, the highest priority should be able to have a continuous delivery to customer of valuable software to the customers. So you want to keep giving the customers something for them to actually look at, which of course kind of keeps them up to speed as far as, okay, what's happening, if the idea that or the vision that they have for their product is coming to life in a more consistent and is becoming a reality. Okay. Now, the second one, it talks about a welcoming changing in requirements. So as I mentioned earlier, sometimes a customer will come in and is looking to get something done. And maybe 2 weeks down the line, they may say, okay, well, you know what, whatever I was trying to do, I think I have a change of plan, or I changed the path that I'm trying to go. So I want to make a change. Now, in a waterfall environment, that's typically hard, or they don't even try to welcome that at all. So, but in the agile environment, we're welcoming that. It doesn't matter at what stage, even late in development, even if the product that you're building, it's towards the end of development and a customer comes in with a change, you should be able to implement those changes. That's what makes the whole, methodology efficient. And the third here talks about delivery working software frequently, right? From a couple of weeks to a couple of months. Now, this really applies a lot for anybody who's ever worked in a Scrum environment before. This applies a lot to that because we know that Scrum recommends sprints, right? Iterations where the team will get together, plan on what they have to deliver on a sprint by sprint basis, and they can commit to this iteration between a week and 4 weeks. So at the end of every sprint, they can push out, whatever they've been able to accomplish, and the customer can look at it, review it, and give their feedback. So what this principle is pushing here is being able to, deliver a working piece of software. Instead of going and building everything and handing it over to the customer, which they may end up not liking or rejecting, you want to give them a piece of it every, at a particular cadence that you've set up. So maybe it's every week or every 2 weeks, you build something small and give it to them, let them play with it, tell you how they feel about it. And that way it also facilitates the changes. Like if they want to make any changes, now you can easily implement those changes because now you're not too far deep into the development process. The next principle talks about developers and business people working together, right? So I understand the audience here today are freelancers. But if you've ever worked in a team environment, maybe for a company or something of that nature, a lot of times there's a disconnect between business people or stakeholders, if you will, and the developers. And that creates a lot of confusion, a lot of roadblocks sometimes, because you will find out the developers are actually building something that the stakeholders are not necessarily asking for, because the business people and the teams are not really communicating. So that gap in communication really ends up, the developers end up building something that business owners are actually expecting something else. So that disconnect there tends to cause an issue. So what this principle is pushing is being able to connect or bridge that gap between business people and developers. So that way, everybody can be on the same page. Now, the next thing, you want to build projects around motivated individuals. Now, teams or individuals, when it comes to Agile, is very key. Like if you think about the values that we just went through, individual interactions with processes and tools, because at the end of the day, the individuals are the ones that build the product, not the tools or the processes. So you want to try to build your project around motivated individuals. So one thing you want to do as whether it's a customer or a manager or even just an individual, you want to have the right people who are actually motivated about the product that you're about to build, motivated about the work, get them together and try to get their product built. Because if you have people who are not motivated, then you may end up not really getting the results that you're actually seeking or looking forward to. The next one talks about the efficient and effective method of conveying information. Development team is face-to-face. Now, goes back again to individual interactions over processes and tools, because typically over the years, we've always prioritized maybe texting or emails to interact with teammates or even colleagues or whomever it is, or even our own peers, right? But Agile is pushing forth the whole concept of face-to-face conversation. And if you think about it, I think it makes sense, because sometimes if you talk to somebody face-to-face, you can, in 5 minutes, you can cover a lot of ground, there's a lot of understanding from a communication standpoint from a 5-minute conversation, as opposed to if you guys try to email each other or text each other back and forth, it takes longer. So that face-to-face interaction, you get the message and you're able to actually get your problems resolved. So Agile is pushing the whole idea of, the best way to convey information is face-to-face. That way the person gets the message, they understand the intent behind your message, as opposed to trying to interpret it. Now, working software is the primary measure of progress. So that's the ultimate goal, right? At the end of the day, it doesn't matter how much documentation we do or how much development we do, but if the product is not working, if the software is not working as intended, then it doesn't mean anything, right? Think about all the gadgets or electronic devices that we buy. If they're not working, who cares about the manual, what manual comes with it, right? So the working software is the ultimate progress, right? That's the ultimate measure of success. If it's working, then, the customer is happy. But if it's not working, but documentation is in place, think about it. That doesn't serve a purpose, because the documentation doesn't really serve a purpose if the software itself is not really working. Now, the 8th principle talks about sustainable development. Now, this is a big one for anybody who's ever worked in a high pressure, high stake environment where, work keeps getting pushed on the developers. And maybe as a freelancer, you've worked with a client or customer before that it is so pushy. Every time they try to pile on more stuff on you and put pressure on you. And that leads to burnout. You tend to work a lot more hours. You tend to put in a lot of effort and can't even get a break, right? So, but Agile is pushing the whole concept of sustainable development. By that is, don't try to overcommit, find a cadence that works. So in an Agile team, for example, if you're working in a Scrum team, if the team has the ability or are comfortable without burning out, delivering 30 story points every sprint, Agile is recommending you stay within that range as far as nothing changes. Now, if you get more team members or more developers on your team, of course, we expect that number to go up, because we've just added a few extra people. But if everything stays the same and the team gets to a point where they're comfortable and their work is sustainable, where it doesn't cause burnout, it doesn't cause stress, right? You want to maintain it in that particular regard. Sustainable development, that's what really matters, because with sustainable development, it gets the team to actually think and be at their best as well, right? So you don't want to say, oh, well, today you guys completed 30 story point. Next sprint, I expect 50 because you guys were able to do 30. That's not sustainable, right? So just to keep that in mind. And also keep that in mind too when you're working with your clients. Now, you may not sell this to your clients necessarily, but at the same time, you want to keep that for your own mental, for your own mental sanity, if you will, right? You want to be able to match, because sometimes you work with so many clients. You want to be able to not burn yourself out to a point where you can be effective or efficient at your job. Now, continuous attention to technical excellence, right? So this basically talks about being able to follow the best practices when it comes to development or whatever work you're doing, because if you focus on the details and the technical excellence and designs, now that enhances agility, because now once you have the right best practices in place and you have the right designs in place, it helps you from scale from that point, because most products that you're going to work on are bound to scale, right? Because nowadays, especially with Agile and technology overall, people don't build products anymore that is just one size fit all, like a one-time thing and push it out. Product requires continuous development, improvement, enhancements, right? So once you have the best technical, you have the best designs in place and you have the best technical infrastructures in place, now that enhances, or that leaves room for scalability. So that's something that developers need to really zone in and focus on, or keep that in mind as well. Now, simplicity is essential. Now, what this principle talks about is basically being able to get enough done. So what we're saying is, if a client might reach out to you and has this vision, as far as this end-to-end vision of what they're trying to accomplish, what you want to do is actually focus on what you can get done at the moment, right? So just maximizing the work that is not done. And by that, you look at the entire vision of what the customer is trying to accomplish and just get enough done, push it out to them so they can look at it and do it all over again. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't overthink it. Don't try to do everything at once, right? Because once you try to do everything at once, and I understand as freelancers, you probably have 10 clients lined up and you're trying to satisfy every one of them. But sometimes being able to give a customer a piece of the work and at a particular cadence that you guys have agreed to, it makes your job easy too and simple, because now you're not trying to pile on too much. You just do what needs to be done, push it out to them, get feedback, reiterate, and just try to adjust from there as you go. So always try to keep it simple. Don't overcomplicate it. Now, the best architectures, requirements, and designs emerge from self-organizing teams. Now, this is a big one, especially if you ever work for a company where you have to work with individuals and teams. And so self-organized teams is an agenda that Agile is pushing forward, like the hardest, if you will, because at the end of the day, when teams are self-organized, and in this case, we're talking about teams that get to decide and think through their own designs, their work, how they're going to deliver on it, and think of the different paths and strategies that they're going to take to deliver on this work, they become more inspired and they do the best work, because now they're not being told what to do, because they are the ones doing the work. So now they can actually think and tap into their own minds and their own ingenuity and try to come up with a better way of getting the job done. So if you think about it, if you ever worked in a team before, and even just yourself as freelancers, you see that you do the best work when you actually get to determine what architectures or what requirements and designs need to go in place, because now you actually tap into the best abilities that you can actually, that you embody. Now, the last principle in this regard talks about regular intervals team needs to reflect, right? The reflecting for Scrum teams, it's called a retrospective, where teams sit back and say, okay, we just went through this entire sprint, or we just did this piece of work. How can we get better? Let's look back at what we just went through. How can we get better? How can we improve our process? How can we improve, team morale? How can we collaborate better, right? You just reflect on the work that you've done. And this can also apply to you as freelancers, because assuming you just got done with a client project, you can sit back and say, okay, how was that client? Is that somebody I want to work with again? I mean, do I feel like I've actually done everything for that client? Did I meet the expectation? Do I feel like I could have done more? Is there something that I want to clean up? So by the time I face another client coming up, I've gathered some kind of experience, or I have some lessons that I've gathered from the previous work that I can use to implement in the next client and grow as well. So how do you apply that on freelance projects? So the first thing you want to do is the why, right? So let me just pull this 3 up. So when you go to like for anybody who's ever read the Scrum Guide, when the Scrum Guide talks about sprint planning, there are 3 phases of it, right? The why, the what, and the how, right? So the first thing you want to do when, especially as a freelancer, you want to determine the why, and these are just the defined goals. So the why is a client reaching out to you? Why are they reaching? What do they want, right? You want to understand what are the goals that they're trying to meet? What is the vision of the product that they're trying to get you to work on, right? So that's the why. Then the second thing you want to determine is what needs to be done, because now you already understand what they're trying to do. Maybe they just want to build a simple website, right? An e-commerce website, or maybe a simple blog. Now you understand that's the why, right? Now, what needs to be done? Now you want to determine, okay, what needs to be done for me to actually, meet that goal, to be able to give them that particular product that they're looking for, right? And that could mean, the what could mean so many things, right? And also remember, we just talked about being able to, come up with your own design, be able to think through designs and architectures and all that. So that's part of the what, right? You're trying to, brainstorm and figure out what are some of the key things or some of the features or functionalities that will actually make that product better than maybe the way the client tried to explain it. Then from there, you determine how you're going to get that done. Typically, the how is solely dependent on the developer or the freelancer in this case, because they are the ones who understand how they're going to get the job done. And normally, stakeholders, managers, clients don't really get involved in that, as long as they've been able to articulate what the goal is, what they're trying to accomplish, and what needs to be done. Typically, they step back and let the developer determine how they're going to get it done. Because at the end of the day, what they care about is being able to see that why, the vision that they actually came up with, to see that to life. Because at this point, it's just, written down on paper. They want to see how it comes to life. So determining how to get that done is up to the developer. Now, another thing you want to do is plan your project, right? Once you've gotten the why from the client and you understand what needs to be done and how you're going to do about it, now you want to plan it, right? You want to make a list of maybe items. In a typical Scrum environment, we call them user stories, where you want to write them out. You want to write the description, maybe lay out some acceptance criteria on it, and also come up with an estimation. Now, in a Scrum environment, we come up with estimations because, of course, we have stakeholders and managers looking into what we're doing. But from a freelancer standpoint, this estimates is what you're going to relay to the client and say, okay, I'm going to get this. I'm going to start on this. I expect to get this done by next week or maybe in 2 weeks, right? And that's an estimate. Remember, it's always an estimate. When you're working with clients, always remember, try not to, because most estimations is in Agile, right? It's not really set in stone. So it's just an estimate, right? You have to make sure you actually echo that, because sometimes you have clients that you will tell them, okay, by next week, Friday, and it's technology, things happen. And if by next week, Friday, you don't deliver that, maybe because you had an impediment or some blocker. Now they start holding your feet to the fire about it and say, oh, well, you promised me this, but you did not. So it's always good to echo that this is just an estimate. Now, of course, you intend to meet that estimate, right? You intend to deliver by that time, but things happen. And if things happen, make sure you relay that to the client, because it's important. Constant communication is very important, because it also keeps you in good spirits with the client, and it makes sure it keeps the client also up to speed as far as what's happening. So if they need to make some kind of changes, because sometimes they may have a launch date that's coming up, if they have to make adjustments as they go, at least they know that you're keeping them up to speed as far as what's happening. Then, of course, you want to relate the project progress. Now, in a Scrum environment, the way we do to relay project progress officially, if you will, is doing through sprint reviews, where at the end of every sprint, we get together and we get the stakeholders and managers. We say, okay, hey, this is what we've been able to accomplish. We'll review it, we'll do some demonstrations, we get feedback, and we go and reiterate, right? So that's how it typically happens in a Scrum environment with teams. But now as freelancers, what you want to do is set maybe a weekly meeting, or depending on just based on the cadence between you and the client. But weekly is always a good thing, because then every week, maybe you meet with the client for 30 minutes, 15 minutes, an hour, however you see fit. So you can at least give them progress as far as how the work is going. Because trust me, I've used freelancers before. And sometimes when you go for 2 weeks and 3 weeks, you don't hear from the freelancer and you have no idea what's going on. It's, it's nerve-wracking a little bit. It gets you anxious, right? Sometimes you're not sure what's happening. But having that weekly meeting where at least the team, the client knows that, okay, this is where this person is with the work, and now I kind of can make my projections around, how they're working. So it's very important. So always try to incorporate that into your work where you have at least weekly. I recommend weekly, but again, some clients might say, I don't have time weekly, maybe do it once every 2 weeks. That's up to you guys, but always try to recommend weekly meetings where you guys can get together and talk about the progress of it. And just so, everybody's on the same page. And also that helps too, not just from not just being on the same page, but also in case they want to make changes. Because I've been in situations where I would want something and during a weekly, meeting of such, I changed my mind. I want to change something else. I want to add something else to it. It's easier to incorporate those at that time as opposed to waiting maybe 2 months down the line when, development is far ahead. Now, of course, since we're talking about freelancing here, you want to take advantage of tools, right? There's so many tools out there because you may be in one country and the client might be in another country. Of course, you guys are not meeting face to face. So you're definitely going to rely on tools. Some will rely on emails. Some will rely on maybe, say if you're on other freelance platform, they'll rely on communication on that platform. But also there are other tools that you can also use outside of those platforms like Miro and Trello. Trello is really good for like product development because then the client can have access and really see, what's being done and how things are moving just from a visualization standpoint. And Miro also helps, especially if you're doing story mapping, but typically that works more on a team level where let's say working in a company where they have teams and all that. But however you see fit, if email is what works best for you, find a tool that works. There's several tools out there. Whatever you want to use it for, you can pick and use, right? But always take advantage of the tools because you're going to need it. Because as freelancers, of course, you're never in the same geographical location with your client. So utilizing tools is really good for to be able to communicate with a client and also show progress. Now, I added this one, the Pomodoro technique. I don't know if any of you guys are using this already. It's a really great technique, especially when you're doing, especially as freelancers, because you may have 5 clients going on at the same time. The Pomodoro basically, for anybody who's not familiar with it, is basically a technique that you use to dedicate certain amount of time to do work. Like say, for example, you can say, okay, I'm going to set a timer that in the next 1 hour, I'm just going to focus on this particular task. And that 1 hour, you concentrate, you lock in, you stay away from every distraction. If you have to put your phone away or whatever it is. And once that timer ends, you take a break. You take like a 5 or 10 minute break, right? That's for your own sanity, because take a break just to kind of get yourself back, grab coffee or whatever you want to do, and come back and do the same thing again. So that's a technique that's been in place for so many years. Some people use it, some people don't, but it's for people like freelancers who actually work with so many clients. It might be good for you because one moment you're working with this client who has a completely different product that you're working on, and the next moment you're working on another client with a completely different product. So it can be, it can get confusing and be stressful in the mind sometimes. So you want to try to establish, build a structure where you don't get too tense. Now, of course, you can always take longer breaks as you go. Let's say you complete a major piece of work, right? You can take a longer break, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes, an hour, whatever it is. But the whole purpose or intention behind it is to dedicate, lock in, get work done at a particular time, then take a break, right? That way you can, manage your own mental, sanity or whatever. Now, why do we want to use Agile for freelance work? The benefits of it, right? There are a couple of benefits. And this applies to freelancers, applies to team as well. So one of the benefits is just to improve efficiency, right? Because if you divide your work, right, in different parts, it gets you to focus. And as we just talked about the Pomodoro, right? Like if you have 3 different clients that you're working on and you divide your work and say, okay, today I'm going to work on client A, or the first 5 hours of today, I'm going to work on client A, and the next 3 hours, I'm going to work on client B. Being able to implement those agile principles and values, and also divide your work, helps you to be efficient. Because sometimes people are tempted to work on multiple things at the same time, try to multitask. It sounds cute and fine, but until you're working in 2 completely different, products, right? So, and speaking as somebody who's been a Scrum Master and a coach, I see that a lot where developers try to do too many things, and at the end of the day, you see that they're not doing anything, right? And that's why sometimes we try to implement WIP limit, which is work in progress. We do that at team levels where we do work in progress, where we say, okay, you're not allowed to take anything else until you complete this much, right? It's a way for them to be focused and be efficient. So that's something you can also utilize along with the Pomodoro technique. Another benefit is motivation, right? Once you, let's say you dedicate your time and say, okay, the next 1 hour, I'm going to work on this, and you complete that, you get motivated because you get to see what you've done. You get to see the accomplishment, the work that you've actually finished. And especially when you present it to the client and the client is happy, as impressed with the work that you've done, you get motivated because now you're seeing some results. But if you find yourself doing too many things at once and you're not really completing anything, then the motivation is not really there, because every time you present that to the client, it seems like you're not going to be getting positive remarks, because at that point, you're not getting anything done because you're trying to do everything at the same time, right? So like the common term we normally use in the Agile space is, stop starting and start finishing, right? So stop starting things and start finishing things that you started, right? So keep that in mind. That gives a different sense of motivation. Then, of course, it improves expertise as well, right? Because once you work on things separately and also you implement those agile principles and values, especially when it comes to meeting with clients and giving them a piece of work that you do at every cadence, let's say every week, then they give you feedback. It also helps you to become better at your job, right? Because now you can see, okay, this is the mistakes that I made. This is how I can adjust to it. And this is how I can make these changes, maybe design changes or technical, changes or here and there. It also helps you grow as a freelancer and also as a developer overall, right? So it makes you better, because at the end of the day, you're going to realize that the experience or the expertise that you had with your very first client is going to be completely different from the expertise that you're going to have with your 10th or 11th client, because now you've learned so much along the way that your expertise has grown tremendously. And of course, timekeeping as well, right? As freelancers, you will know time is a big thing for you, especially when you have a lot of clients waiting for you to get a job done, right? You have so many deadlines you have to meet. Being able to manage your time and implementing these agile principles and guidelines and values, it helps you manage your time, because now you know how to really, break your time down into different, different in pieces where you can actually focus and say, okay, I'm delivering this person this time, this person this time. It helps you in that regard. So timekeeping is also a big factor when you implement Agile into your work. And I understand that Agile has been promoted mostly for teams, but remember, individuals can use it. I know people, I've had clients that actually use it and with their families and use it with their personal life. So it's not just a team thing. So it's just something that you want to get used to, because I mean, as developers, which I would like to assume that all of you here are developers of some sort, or maybe designers, you pretty much work on technology, and these being able to be agile, working with your clients and being able to deliver what they want at the time that they want is very key and essential. Of course, it helps you prioritize better, right? Because now you can prioritize with the client in terms of, okay, what functionality do you value more? I'm going to deliver that. Okay, this person, when do you expect to get this project ready? Okay, now it helps you prioritize which client you should you should focus on the most. Now, I'm not saying some clients are not important, but some clients just have longer delivery expectations or anticipations than others. Some might say, okay, I need you to get this done by next month. Some might say next week. So it helps you prioritize, and also prioritize at a smaller level where the client says, okay, I want to build an e-commerce platform, right? And you know, okay, maybe getting a login or search button to be a priority. Like it helps you really be able to, you know, look at what are some of the things that the client will value more, and you build that value and give it to them. And why they're looking at it, reviewing it, at least now you know what next, what comes next in the priority list. So while we're talking about this, it sounds counterintuitive, right? That we're talking about Agile and being to freelancers, especially freelancers are mostly people that work alone. They're solo artists, if you will, right? But I put this slide up here just so you understand where things are going. Some of you might go back and work for companies after this or at some point in your life. Some of you may never do it. But just to keep a few things in mind, some of the numbers here, like I believe you're probably reading it already, how far Agile has come, right? If you think about 71% of companies are using Agile, right? 64% success rate compared to 49% success rate, right? With the non-Agile projects, right? If you think about Agile projects, nearly 1.5 times more successful than waterfall projects, because, you know, all that comes due to the flexibility and adaptability, because now a client can come in and say, oh, well, I don't want this anymore. I want this now. And you can make those changes. Waterfall doesn't give you that, right? And that causes a lot of problems and sometimes disagreement and breach of contract and all that stuff that Agile really gives you the room to avoid, you know. And companies have experienced an average of 60% growth in revenue and profit after adopting Agile. Typically, that happens because Agile gets you faster to market time, right? If you think about the technologies and software that we're using today, every now and then, even on the applications that we're using, every day or so, you'll see, oh, there's an update. You have to update the app. All those are because teams are working in an Agile environment. They don't build an entire software or entire platform and send it out. They build a little bit of it, send it out, let the customers or users play with it, and they iterate and keep adding, you know, different features and functionalities as they go and making it better. So that's how companies, you know, experience that amount of growth, because now they can actually test the market, and if it's not working, they can cancel it, they can kill the product and start something else or adapt based on what the market is responding. And of course, like I highlighted earlier, Scrum is the most popular framework. 61% of companies are using it, right? I mean, companies are getting in there and it's going by the day. Like I remember, I mean, prior to COVID, like the demand for Scrum Masters or Agile projects or products, quote unquote, was not that big, but you know, things are changing now. Companies are realizing that, okay, for us to be able to compete in this market, we need to be Agile. And instead of sitting around and building a product and putting it out there, we might as well just get into that Agile space where we'll be able to get to market faster, communicate with our users faster, and be able to iterate without, you know, losing a lot of money and spending so much money on something that the customers don't really want. I believe that should be the end of it, my slide. Any questions? Martha, I think we got a couple of things on the chat.
Yes. So let's do a couple of questions because we are running out of time. So one of the questions could be, how do you sell Agile work in packages for a fixed package price instead of time-based in managed expectations well?
Well, you don't sell Agile as a package. So here's the thing about Agile, right? It's not something that you sell with your services. It's just something that you implement, right? You try to implement. It's a substitute. It's a process that you need to implement with your work. Like the things we just talked about, where they say you meet with a client and you understand, okay, this is what they want, and this is how I'm going to get it done. And you start pushing those things forward as, okay, now I want us to meet every week, right? I'm going to deliver an increment to you in 2 days for you to play with and tell me how you feel, and I can iterate on that. So you don't really bundle it as a fixed package because it's not a standalone thing. It's just something that you incorporate, right? To the work that you're doing. It makes sure it's just there to ease you, make your job easier.
In last questions, any source for your last numbers percentages on your previous slide?
Any source of
source for those numbers and percentage that you show.
Okay. Sources of data and percentage you shared. Okay. Oh yes. Oh yeah, I did not add the source. Oh, you know what?
Yeah.
True. Yeah. That is my fault. Yeah, this this website, that's what they do. They actually do survey on. I can share it with you. Honestly, I can. I just forgot the name because it's funny because I was reading about because it's a website that I'm always reading stuff from. Yeah, I did not. That is my fault, but I can share that with Martha, and Martha can share with you guys. Yeah, what they do is they do a lot of survey with companies as far as product development and other aspects of it. Yeah, I should have shared that. It's just that the name's left. It's kind of skipped my mind, but I can definitely because it's a site that I'm always on, so I can share that with you.
That's okay. Yeah, I can share it later.
Yes.
Perfect. So I think the webinar is coming to an end now. Thank you, everyone. If you have any other questions that you would like to ask, you can either send us an email or connect with us on LinkedIn or with Ronnie. So thank you all for joining us. Thank you so much, Ronnie, for sharing such a rich presentation. And again, those of you who don't have a 9 a.m. account, feel free to reach out and we can help you setting everything up. Thank you all and have a great
evening. Martha, before you go, I see some questions here. I don't know if we have a few minutes. If not, you can share my email or my LinkedIn, especially LinkedIn, because I respond to LinkedIn faster than anything else, right? So if these questions, because I think I see some really interesting questions here and comments. Since we're running out of time, if you can share,
maybe
reach out.
Let's do one more. Let's do one more. So
okay.
The last one would be how to sell Scrum to companies, like hourly rate.
Okay, so the last part about this question said hourly rate. I'm not sure if the person can be more specific, but as far as scaling Scrum, how do you sell Scrum to companies? Well, the thing about selling Scrum, it's a journey, right? It's not a destination. And okay, so it said charge hourly. Now, as a freelancer, if you're speaking from a freelancer perspective, now selling Scrum is all about the process that you want to put in place, because a lot of managers are still skeptical about it or not even familiar with it. What you have to do is the way that I've sold it to managers to buy into it is I've done trainings. And by trainings, I've actually used past experiences and past success stories to actually validate my proposition. And I've also done tests with teams where I'll take a team and we'll run a Scrum, we'll run sprints for like 2-3 sprints and use that and show the manager and say, hey, look at what we've accomplished compared to before that you were not doing this. So it's a journey thing that I don't know if freelancers have enough time to work with the company to sell that, because it's a journey. It's not something you can do in a month or 2 or even 6 months. Some takes a couple of years, some takes months, right? But the whole thing you can do as far as selling it is being able to convince the benefits that you get out of it, right? Once you understand how you can implement that to your work and get benefits out of it, you can use that proposition and put it in front of the manager and say, hey, this is what it can do for you because it's worked for me before. And let me do a test, a pilot on it, especially when you have a manager who is skeptical, and say, okay, I'm gonna run a work in a Scrum, I'm gonna create a Scrum bubble or a Scrum space and do that for maybe a sprint or 2, and you see the results compared to before you started doing that.
Cool, thank you. So I think we have to close now. If you have any other questions, just please reach out to us or to Ronnie on LinkedIn.
And since we're jumping off, sorry, Martha, no, sorry. Yes, you charge for the test because the test sprint, because you're actually doing work. So yes, you charge because you're actually doing work, right? Yes.
Cool. So yeah, thank you, Ronnie. That was great. I hope everyone enjoyed this session and see you soon. Have a great evening.
All right.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.